Welcome to Military Faith and Spiritual Resilience. This is Elizabeth Fulgaro. With me today is Erin Nichols, nutrition and fitness coach and Gold Star wife. Hi, Erin.
Hi, Elizabeth.
At the end of our last episode, you were sharing about deployment mode, that space that as a spouse you had to get into emotionally in order to cope with the stresses of having your husband deployed to Iraq. Do the ones deployed also experience something like that? And is it the same or is it different?
I think it's very different because they have a job to do. So that's what they're focused on. And kind of the way I saw it, the way I came to see it and got better at it as time went on was I need to be able to put my head down and focus on something as well. So he had his job to do there, and I had my job to do at home, which was basically to keep myself together. And that usually meant just keep myself busy and focused on me. Earlier on, we had talked about Sam and Erin.
Yes.
As one word, becoming Sam and Erin. And because we had very much grown up together, became adults together, there was a lot that I still didn't, there was still a lack of separateness in me, like, what do I actually like? And so that time apart allowed me to just kind of figure out, like, oh, I like this thing or whatever. I enjoy watching American Idol with his mom, and he would never watch American Idol or something like that. So there was that kind of independence part of it on my side, and then just like a focus on whatever the things were that I was doing. And for him, I don't think the emotional detachment, though, that I was talking about was necessarily there. It was just a focus on work and being in the moment. And at least for him, I can't speak for anyone else, any other, wife or any other troop who's deployed, but I really didn't get that sense from him that there was anything emotionally different. For me, there was a big emotional difference because I was putting up that wall of protection.
To protect your heart.
Right.
Because he had to be away. So he's away 7 months.
Mm-hmm.
You hadn't really been apart that long before, and the separations before had been difficult, and you learned to build these emotional walls to survive. But now he comes back. What does reunification look like?
I was a ball of emotions. Similar, actually, his boot camp graduation, too. I was an emotional wreck. But the biggest thing is I just would hear people come back from war different. And yes. What did that look like? I knew he'd seen combat. It wasn't like he was there sitting in office for 7 months. He had seen stuff. And I didn't know what that was going to mean for his personality, for our relationship, anything like that. And especially because we were hardly able to talk on the phone. We wrote letters to each other, but we hadn't seen each other for 7 months. And significant things had happened in his life, that he had seen that I wasn't a part of. And so I was really nervous about just like, what was he going to be like more long-term? Was there going to be PTSD? What was that going to look like? And then even just like imagining the moment of like seeing each other for the first time, it got me nervous in kind of a bad way, but then also like really excited and like butterflies too.
So a lot of different emotions.
Yeah.
Like a ball, like all tangled up together.
Yeah. And like most things, I made more of it in my head than I needed to.
Okay. So what did it look like when reunification came?
It was great.
Awesome. That's great.
Yeah, we were, it reminded me a little bit of like boot camp graduation, as where all the families are like kind of sitting there on the sidelines waiting. There's a big like asphalt area. They would fly into Riverside and then be bussed back down to Camp Pendleton. There's an old closed down Air Force Base, March Air Force Base, where they would fly into. And so then we're like waiting for the buses to get there. And then there was a brief kind of, the commander gets up and talks and whatever, and nobody's listening what the commander has to say until like you're dismissed. And then, you go and you find your people. And so I just remember seeing each other and, wrapping each other in our arms. And then it was like, poof, back to normal.
Wow.
It was just like, it was that fast. It was, there wasn't like a having to get to know each other again. It just felt, it was Sam and Erin.
Oh, very nice.
Instantly. So the things that we did have to do kind of initially was he hadn't driven for 7 months. And every time he was in a vehicle, he was scouring the landscape for anything that might be an IED, and other personal vehicles couldn't be within 100 meters. So we kind of decided, let's give it a couple weeks before you drive.
Oh, yes.
Get reacclimated to having vehicles next to you, seeing a paper bag on the sidewalk as the passenger before you get in the driver's seat. And that was a really good decision.
It sounds like it.
Yeah. And because I remember there was specifically one time we were going down Oceanside Boulevard, and there's a bus stop right there. And there was a paper bag that was on the ground next to the, it probably had a liquor bottle in it or something like that next to the bus stop bench. And he has this immediate instinct to, I don't know what he would have done, but his immediate thought is IED.
Sure. So did you notice any other changes in Sam?
Definitely. He had, not with me, but with work, he had a lot of anger that he didn't have before.
Wow.
A lot of anger and frustration and problem sleeping.
And you said the anger was related to his work?
Yeah. So we always had one car because he would be gone for 7 months.
Sure.
And then whenever he was stateside, I just drove him to and from work. I didn't want to contribute to our lack of time together. So I didn't want to have a job as well. And so when I would pick him up from work, is 15 miles from our apartment to where he was on base. So one way. So we had a 15-mile drive back home. And it would be him venting and unloading his frustration from the day. And never with me. I mean, there was a palpable when he got in the car. And then hopefully he would get most of that out in the drive home before we got home. And then usually he would go take a shower and I would start dinner. And then kind of the evening was really I became a de-escalation therapist or something, because the evening was basically trying to get him to calm down and just be able to relax, because it was he was never able to just get into that relaxed state. That hypervigilance had remained, but the circumstances were different. So, we went, we got him a supplement called Calm. We would drink chamomile tea in the evening. I literally was consciously talking quieter and slower than normal. And was always just trying to be very reassuring of this is what we're going to do. We're going to have this for dinner. Go take a shower. We'll watch reruns of Everybody Loves Raymond. And that was just kind of this routine that we got into. And it probably took most of that 7 months before that next deployment, before he was kind of okay. Agoraphobia was a big one too, and claustrophobia, actually. So those were new. So on the weekends, we would usually, Saturday or Sunday or both days, we would take a shower together in the morning. And every now and then he would just have an absolute panic attack. He'd be like, move, I have to rinse off. And he'd have to get out. And then once he was out, he was okay. But, he's with his wife in his shower in his apartment. And it would just come over him and he just had to get out. And then with crowds too, like we went home for Christmas, and whenever you come home from the military, like back to your hometown, it's exhausting because you have to go and make the rounds and see everybody, or there's like big gatherings, or so everybody can come and see him. And so we had 2 or 3 different Christmas things we were doing, and just nothing was like rowdy, but just because there's so many different groups of people talking in a
Yes.
house, it was just kind of loud for him and a little bit overwhelming. And so he would just like disappear. And sometimes he would go outside and take a short walk, or depending on like whose house we were at, he would go upstairs or whatever, and just try to like separate himself and kind of regather himself. And nobody else really saw this. I saw it. And then one time we went to SeaWorld. And I don't know if they still do this, but back then, SeaWorld, all the Anheuser-Busch parks would give like once a year active duty, and I think up to 4 dependents would get free admission. And so we usually went to SeaWorld once a year. And that time, however long it was after that deployment, we went to go, and it was probably the least amount of people we'd ever seen there. And we were there for maybe 45 minutes. And he was like, I can't do this. We have to go. And just, that was it.
What was it about the numbers of people? Was it the escalation of the sound? Or were there other things with the hypervigilance?
I think it was probably the hypervigilance, because I don't remember SeaWorld being loud. I mean, you're outside,
right?
And everything's really, really spread out. I mean, they have like a huge tram that goes across the park. It's an enormous property. And yeah, like I was saying, it was like the least amount of people we'd ever seen there, but just something about that day, whatever it was, he couldn't handle it. There were other times, like we went to IKEA and he was fine. I mean, IKEA's like a maze. Like if you're going to feel claustrophobic anywhere, IKEA would be the place. But, we went there and he was fine. So it just kind of depended. Just like sometimes, the shower, no big deal. Otherwise we wouldn't have kept doing it. But it was just a few times that was it just hit him, and he would have to escape, basically.
So unpredictable.
Yeah.
So you said, 7 months away, 7 months home, and then a redeployment?
Yeah. So his second deployment was called a MU, Marine Expeditionary Unit, where the Marines go out on ships with the Navy. So their home port was in Okinawa, Japan, and they went to Guam, the Philippines, Thailand, and Japan. So that was another 7 months. And that time, it was a little bit becoming old hat.
Okay.
Got this, back into deployment mode. Okay. That time I ended up living with his mom, and right before that deployment, actually, his parents split up. And so it was kind of like my brother-in-law, Donnie, got custody of dad, and I got custody of mom.
Oh, okay.
And he and I were like the go-between, We still hung out as we had done before. But it was like, yeah, like we were envoys for the, parental parties. So yeah, I went back into deployment mode, basically. And so that time around, I went back to work at the country club where we had all worked before. Donnie actually ended up maybe halfway through that deployment getting rehired and starting. So we worked together again. And then I was going to school and I was going to the gym. And I had a pretty tight schedule. And my life was work, school, gym. Because of my school schedule, that gave me good routine. And so my school schedule determined my work schedule. And then when I wasn't at school and it was or work, I was at the gym. And that was the first time I really got into fitness. I was always athletic. I was running around. I had a ball in my hand all the time growing up. But, as a late teenager, early 20s, I fell in love. I found another hobby. And so during this deployment, I had just actually started to work out again before that deployment at Camp Pendleton, and had a personal trainer there, and they did the body fat testing and all that stuff. And I was like 33% body fat, which I didn't like. And I was maybe a little bit overweight, but I was mostly over fat than I was overweight. And so that was my goal I was like, all right, straight A's, save a bunch of money, and get lean. And I basically halved my body fat percentage in 7 months. I was like 16% body fat when he came home, which is, I think, still the leanest I've ever been. I definitely have a lot more muscle, and I'm in much better shape in general now than I was then. And I know how to do it the right way now as well, but that was my focus. And that deployment went much more smoothly because, it was the second go around, and I knew to create that routine, create that focus. And
were the walls the same then, or were they different?
They were still there. They were definitely still there. I think I was less afraid of the ending before, because we'd had that reunification, and it went great. And so I wasn't really worried about that again. He also wasn't going to war this time.
Yes.
So that made a big difference. They ended up doing some humanitarian relief during that deployment. I was actually at work at the country club and walking through the grill area, and they have the TVs on, and some news channel was on, and they said there's this earthquake that caused this massive mudslide on one of the Philippine islands, Leyte. And they said there's a Marine unit nearby that is redirecting to go provide humanitarian aid. And I was like, that's Sam. Because I knew their itinerary, and that's what they're supposed to be doing. They were going to go do work with the Philippine Marines. And so, sure enough, the next day, I got word through the chain of command that is indeed what they were doing. The Marines cross-decked. They went from one ship to another. The other two ships went on to go do the training, I guess, with the Philippine Marines. And then the ship he cross-decked to, they went and spent, I think, 4 days there, helping clear roads and things like that. And he said it was the most miserable 4 days of his life.
Oh, my goodness. Very nice that he did it, though. But hard work.
Yeah.
So, can we continue talking next time?
Absolutely.
Thank you, Erin.